On screen, they were cowboys, heartthrobs, and symbols of American masculinity. But behind the studio portraits and heroic roles, some of Hollywood's most iconic Western stars were hiding lives the industry would never allow them to live openly. In an era built on image, secrecy wasn't just personal, it was survival. 1. Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter was born in 1931 and died in 2018. And for a time, Hollywood sold him as the perfect American man. Blonde, athletic, clean-cut, and effortlessly charming, he fit the studio-made image of a Western star audiences could trust. In films like The Burning Hills and Gunman's Walk, Hunter didn't just look the part, he embodied the version of masculinity 1950s Hollywood wanted to market. But his real life didn't fit that script. Behind the publicity photos and carefully staged romances, Hunter was a gay man forced to protect his career by hiding who he was. What makes his story so powerful is not just the secrecy, but the contrast. A man turned into a symbol of traditional manhood while privately living in fear of exposure. Years later, Hunter reclaimed his own story, turning silence into truth. 2. Anthony Perkins. Born in 1932, Anthony Perkins is remembered by most audiences as the unsettling face of Psycho. But before that role came to define him, he also appeared in films with Western and frontier themes, bringing a nervous intensity that made him very different from the traditional cowboy hero. That difference became part of his screen power, but in Hollywood, it also made him vulnerable. Behind the polished image, Perkins lived under enormous pressure to fit a version of masculinity the industry considered safe. His private life was far more complicated, shaped by secrecy, fear, and the constant need to appear acceptable in public. What makes his story so haunting is how that inner conflict seems to live inside his performances. Even at his calmest, there is always tension beneath the surface. He died in 1992, leaving behind not just iconic roles, but the story of a man who spent much of his life divided against himself. 3. Ramon Novarro. Born in 1899, Ramon Novarro was one of the earliest male idols Hollywood ever created. Silent-era audiences knew him as a romantic and heroic star, especially after Ben-Hur in 1925 turned him into an international sensation. On screen, he represented elegance, strength, and a carefully manufactured kind of masculine mystery. But like many stars of that era, Novarro lived inside a system that demanded image control above all else. His public life was shaped by studio publicity, while his private world remained guarded and largely hidden from the audience that admired him. What makes his story especially tragic is the contrast between the grandeur of his stardom and the loneliness that seemed to surround his later years. As Hollywood changed, his fame faded, but the secrecy never truly left. He died in 1968, and his violent death only deepened the sadness surrounding a life that had long been lived behind a mask. 4. George Maharis. Born in 1928, George Maharis rose to fame as one of television's most magnetic young stars, carrying a restless edge that made him feel more dangerous and unpredictable than the polished leading men around him. His success on Route 66 gave him the kind of visibility Hollywood could easily turn into a lasting screen career, including roles that leaned into his rugged masculinity. But Maharis' story stands out because it shows how quickly that image could collapse once scandal entered the picture. In his case, the damage came less from proven facts than from public suspicion, headlines, and the stigma attached to any suggestion of homosexuality at the time. What makes his story so powerful is that it reveals how little protection fame really offered when the industry decided someone had become a risk. He died in 2023, long after the moment that changed the course of his career forever. 5. Richard Cromwell. Born in 1910, Richard Cromwell entered Hollywood with the kind of youthful sensitivity that made him stand out, even if he never fully matched the hard-edged masculinity the studio system preferred. He appeared in adventure and Western-leaning films during the early sound era, and for a moment, it seemed possible that he might grow into a major star. But Cromwell's story feels different from the others, because it is shaped less by fame than by disappearance. His brief marriage to Angela Lansbury later came to symbolize the kind of union Hollywood often encouraged when image mattered more than truth. In that sense, his life reveals a quieter side of the same system, not just the pressure to hide, but the pressure to perform normalcy at any cost. Over time, he drifted away from the screen and into a more private life. He died in 1960, largely forgotten by the industry that had once tried to shape him. Subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories the studios never wanted you to hear.